Races. Well, races then. I don't really know much about racing, it has to be said. Oops, wrong one. Haha, I can do this. This is a professional production. Top 5 Tuesday. Top 5 races. Well, maybe like racing tracks, or because I couldn't name specific racing events just because I don't partake in racing, really. In fact, not at all. So I'm not really sure what this suggestion was all about, because this was a suggestion. But I suppose, Mel, maybe I can talk about individual tracks in racing games. That's the best I can do, because I don't know much about racing. So number 5. Well, gee, now I've got to do race tracks in racing games. Whew. Difficult. I'm going to perhaps start with number 5. It's whatever the first track is called on Wipeout 2097. Oh, is it 2097 or is it the first Wipeout? The one with the big jump in it. It's quite a good track. And the reason I list this one is because there's a lot going on, and it's a good starter track in Wipeout. See, Wipeout is a very fast-paced racing game, and the first track does a great job of giving you a good feel of what you're supposed to be doing. So you can't really easily take tight turns in Wipeout unless you learn how to do it, unless you learn how to maneuver your craft and tilt it around such that you're able to do the windy bit at the end. But there's also quite a lot of straights in the track, and there's a big old jump at the start, so it's a fantastic introduction to the world of Wipeout. So that's the one. I can't remember the name of it, but that's the first one. No, number 5, I should say. Number 4, I'm going to say, I will just say I'll try and keep to different racing games in this, but number 4, probably the advanced track, Dinosaur Canyon, I think it's called in later re-releases, from Daytona, USA. Again, a great, well-rounded track. It's got everything. It's got a couple of turns that you really have to learn how to drift on, and it's got a few tighter turns. It's got a few wide, easy turns. I mean, it's all just turns, really. That's what I mean about realistic racing tracks, and Dino Canyon is kind of a realistic racing track in a very arcadey racing game. But it's a good track, it's fun to drive around in, and it looks great. And of course it's Daytona, so I've got to include something from that. Number 3. Again, I can't quite remember the name of it. I think it's something Mines? Something like that, from Star Wars Racer. It's quite a long track. In fact, I'm probably conflating multiple tracks here. But it's a long track. It's got a bit of an anti-gravity section. And it's got this one section where you've got to... It's kind of like a helix type scenario. And on different laps, different doors will open and close. So you can't just pick the same route each time. You've got to go different routes. And I think I'm thinking of the same track at the end. There's 3 different routes you can take. I mean, there's so many great tracks in Episode 1 Racer. It's such a brilliant racing game, and possibly the best thing to come out of the prequels. Yeah, that track with the anti-gravity section, it's fantastic because, well, A, because it's got an anti-gravity section, B, because I'm pretty sure you can pick multiple routes, and so it can be different each time. There's also, if I recall, there's quite a long straight bit, so you can get up a ridiculous amount of speed, but then towards the end you've got to slow it down. You've got to be careful. You can take it quite quickly if you know what you're doing, but you've got to know what you're doing. But it's just the fact that it's such... I mean, all the tracks in that are great. I don't think there's a bad track in the whole of Episode 1 Racer, and there's a significant number of tracks. It just keeps going and going and going. You think, oh, I've got to have some repeats at some point, but never does. Not until the Invitationals, anyway. So yes, that's my number 3 choice. The one track with the anti-gravity bit and the rocks that you've got to avoid on Star Wars Episode 1 Racer. Number 2, Maple Treeway from Mario Kart Wii. Mario Kart Wii has the best driving model in the whole of the Mario Kart series. Now, that's a controversial opinion, I realise, because a lot of people are like, oh, Mario Kart Wii is baby's first Mario Kart. And to be fair, in many ways, it's not as skillful as your earlier Mario Karts, like, well, 64 and below. I'm thinking, yeah, you really need to learn how to drift in those games. I could never get the hang of it in Double Dash. Lots of people say Double Dash is the best ever. But the thing with Mario Kart Wii is that it's got the Mac bike. I think it's got a different name in the US version. That bike is the best thing in Mario Kart. You can drive around on that. You can build up some ridiculous speed and do the wheelies. But the way that it drifts, it's got really tight turns, so you can just weave in and out of different races and different obstacles and stuff. Maple Treeway is a brilliant example of that because it's got that one part in the middle where it's got all the leaves that you can blast through and get some items out of them. But it's also just got a really great atmosphere, and the soundtrack is fantastic for Maple Treeway. There are some other tracks which make better use of the Mac Bike's particular drifting, but Maple Treeway is just a great, solid go-to track, and there's a reason why they brought it to Mario Kart 8. Anyway, number 1, well, it's got to be something from Crash Team Racing, and I've been trying to think of a suitable track because they're all really, really good in CTR. But I would probably go for Sewer Speedway, simply because I love the secret in it. There's a shortcut you can take on Sewer Speedway, and you can take it normally. It's a relatively standard track. Otherwise, it's got this big half pipe when you're going through the sewer pipes, and you can sort of go up and down and do some tricks off that, and that's fairly quick. And you can sort of drift around the edges, and it's quite fast. But there's this one shortcut you can take. It's quite high up, and you've really got to master being able to drift and jump and then drift again and get up that speed. And you gotta. I'm just trying to describe it. So you're effectively in a half pipe, and you've got to drift and get all 3 boosts on your drift before you go up the ramp. You've got to jump off, launch yourself, and then use the momentum on the way back down to go down the half pipe and then up the other side and get it in just the right place that you go through this little hole in the wall and then you skip half the track. It's pretty great, but it's so precise, and just practicing that trick and practicing that maneuver it's such a thrill when you get it right. But even without that, the track is just brilliant. It's got these massive barrels of toxic waste that roll around. And like I said, the whole half-pipe thing is so much fun. Working out how quickest to manoeuvre around it with all these other racers around as well. Yeah, tons of fun, that track. And that's my top 5 races, I guess. I could probably do a top 5 from each one of those games, to be honest. Although probably not Daytona, since that only has 3 tracks. But the rest of them, yeah, could totally do a top 5. But anyway, that's all from me. And I've probably gone over time, but I can't really tell, because I do tend to cut these things down. So I'll just leave it there. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you all tomorrow. If I had a little checkered flag, I'd wave it now. There you go. Pretend to wave a checkered flag. Done that one. Done that one. I would happily click remove here, but It doesn't. It doesn't go anywhere. Really? Again?